Hi Shiladitya, welcome to the CTQ Smartcast.
Hey, thank you so much. Hi, Harish. How are you doing? And thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so you are a trained podcast guest as well as a host. So there are not going to be any easy trial balls for you. We're going to start with a so-called tough one,
Oh
right off the
my.
bat. So first question for you: what do you know about podcasting that others don't?
Oh wow. Oh, okay. That's a good one. What I know about podcasting is it's surprisingly easy, right? People think that you for to be a podcaster you need to have like some gift of gab or a interesting setup or whatnot. But the truth is, I got into it with no preparation, no planning, no prior even understanding of it. And here I am, some 150 plus episodes of a show, and uh, doing, I hope, more of it every day. So, yeah, podcasting is surprisingly easy. I tell people, whoever asks me, that they ask me for pointers and say, tell me what I can do, what I can learn. I say usually, if you like having a conversation with other humans, you'll do fine. So that's all you need.
Yeah. So the what you're trying to tell me is don't be scared of it, right?
Exactly, exactly. Nothing to be scared of. Of course not. Don't be scared of anything. But especially podcasting, I think is very easy. And now in the days of Zoom, and where doing a call like this is sort of is normal. You don't have to even worry about most people being presentable and having a interesting background, and being having decent enough setup for their home calls. It's actually very easy. You just need to find the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So like you mentioned, Shunya One has done 150 plus
Yeah,
episodes now.
yeah.
So how has the show changed, over these 150 episodes? If you look back to, the first few episodes and how things are now, how has the
Oh,
show changed?
okay, that's also an interesting story, right? Because when we started the show, again, this is back in 2017, podcasting was not as cool as it is, now. I think podcasting was very new, especially in India. I started this with my co-host Amit, who's the founder of IVM.
Right.
And back then, they were the only sort of mini studio doing anything in the podcasting realm.
Correct.
And the background was that he said, listen, podcasting is all about creating content, and tech and startups and entrepreneurship is a good space, obviously a well talked about space. I think back then we were obviously the newspapers, the articles, everything. Startup ecosystem had arrived. It had just not arrived on audio, on podcasts.
Hmm.
And he said he wants to do a show like that. I just wrapped up my last startup. We was figuring out what to do next. I said, okay, I know a few people who might oblige, coming and spending an hour of their time with us. And mostly it was me thinking that, hey, I tend to meet a lot of entrepreneurs anyway. I usually, back then you usually would travel to another city, or if there's someone was in town, you used to say, let's plan, catch up over coffee or beer and just exchange notes, right? The startup community is very, I would say, open to sort of this sort of osmosis of, hey, how are you doing? How are you do? How am I doing? It's also like a sneaky little status check on, am I doing stuff right? Because most founders are always, whatever stage of success they might be in, they always are questioning what could go wrong next. So I was fortunate to know a lot of people, and I said, okay, sure, let me try this out. Let's do the chat which we would have done over beers or coffee, but with a mic in front of us. And that would be the only difference. So we started out like that, and we started out also thinking that we'll talk a lot more about current tech and current market. But the show very soon evolved to telling startup stories and startup journeys of the individual founders who were coming on as guests, because we saw that, I mean, most people actually wanted to hear about that.
Hmm.
And podcasting as a format also, I think, allows for you to talk a lot more, or go into a lot of depth, which you would not go into if you're writing the same thing in a blog post. You try
Right.
to be more concise. If you were on a panel in, let's say, on an event, you would be obviously speaking very sort of structured talking points. Your PR has allowed you to. So we soon realized that most people coming on the show liked telling elaborate stories, and people like listening to it. So we've moved on to, being very sort of personal, 0 to 1 stories, as the name suggests, Shunya One, of all the guests who come on the show, whatever their path may have been to
Right.
where they are today.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Before I go deeper into that, I wanted to draw a parallel line. You spoke about how the show changed. How, over the last 3 4 years now, how has the show changed you?
Oh wow, the show has changed me for sure. Again, I think I was one of those little skeptic folks about doing something which is not my natural, I would say, format. And again, not that I had another, like, I was one of those folks who was never into really writing a lot.
Hmm.
I mean, I tweet. I like Twitter because it's used to be 160 characters. I wasn't. I didn't have my own blog post. I didn't have my personal brand as such, where I used to sort of put content up. And the show actually sort of allowed me to do that. I think now I definitely understand that, having doing this and being able to sort of maintain doing this as the show, as the host of the show, being able to reach out to people who I otherwise did not have in my network, just to say, hey, I'd love to have you on as a guest and talk about something, and them obviously recognizing that yes, this is a credible brand. It's one of those, of course, now there are so many tech podcasts, but I try to underscore folks saying, hey, we were one of the first few ones, so that's why we have so many episodes, etc. So I think the show has changed me because I realized that this is, good, I would say, personal capital for anyone to build. I think I see the value of it now. I see the fact that being able to have a platform like this, being able to, like I said, get people, have access to people and share that with the audience is a privilege, and I want to keep doing it as long as I can. So that's what's changed me. I always start stuff with no expectations, because I know things can bomb. Again, that's the founder mindset. But once things start rolling, now I feel I have a responsibility. So I think that's what's changed me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if you were to, you mentioned a couple of points here, right, where you said you spoke about your personal social capital that gets
Yeah.
created. There's a body of work, of
Yes.
yours on the internet now, right? And I can get a peek into your mind the way you are asking questions. What gets you curious when a guest says something? What are the kind of questions that you ask? Even though we met 5 years ago, I still have now
Yeah.
a very fair idea of you as a person, right? Because of the
Hmm.
kind of questions that you are asking. This could be a great thing for leaders and founders, not just for small companies, startups, entrepreneurs, but even for the larger companies, right? And we have
Hmm.
some examples of some of these leaders, like I think Ravi Kumar S of Infosys has a great, podcast that he hosts. But there are a lot of, entrepreneurs who are also doing this, right? So,
Yes.
what would your advice be to these people in terms of starting a podcast? Should they be starting with this objective of building social capital, or should they be looking at it primarily from the perspective of learning? And should they have that that marketing layer on top of it, or should it be a very personal, individual pursuit of
So,
just meeting interesting people?
so yeah, let me try to break that down a little bit the way I see it, right?
Right.
Yeah, amongst the questions you shared. So I think having social capital is no longer a choice for especially a founder,
Right.
or someone trying to build a company. If building a company requires you to be the spokesperson of the company, the torchbearer of why we are doing this, not just externally but also internally, right? I mean, for you to, let's say, attract talent, for people to join you on your mission to scale your brand, you are you are representative of your of your startup. So you can't say that I won't be on Twitter, I will not have a social profile, I'll just sit in my office and do my work
Hmm.
anymore. Unfortunately,
Right.
that's not the game being played globally. So
Mm-hmm.
that's unavoidable. And I think having a podcast or any sort of personal brand content just is an extension of that. If you do it well, it can accelerate your your growth, your, I would say, your presence in whatever domain you're trying to build a company in. In fact, before going into what hosting or running a show might do, even showing up and being on such forums is itself a first step. And I think I've had founders who've showed up on our show actually come back and tell me that I've people have seen your show, and I've found investors because of that. People have seen heard me talk about my startup on Shunya One, and I've had employees who've reached out and joined us. So clearly there is momentum in which will get formed if you even participate in this conversation, wherever that may be. When it comes to building your own, it's I think that's where people start to identify you as original sort of thought leaders. It's just like writing your own blog post. It used to be that. It used to be like writing a op-ed in a newspaper once in a while. That used to be the old school version of what is happening today, maybe, right?
Right.
But I think your own show, your own podcasting channel, or at least some sort of outreach channel is a very good place to start on the personal brand, especially because it lends your own voice to things
Hmm.
instead of just your writing. It's your own voice, your own thought process. People see and hear you in your own words. You get to say a lot more than trying to put in just in the literally sense.
Right.
And the marketing and branding there is nothing but just doing it well. I
Hmm.
think that's also one of the things I learned in this journey, by the way. You we People have had podcasts around for a while. Like I said, the journey in India, it was very little, but whatever little was happening was also happening in a very amateur way.
Hmm.
Like people had their own channels. Your YouTube channels had started, but we saw that the production quality and sort of a little bit of planning and a little bit of, I would say, packaging
Hmm.
definitely helped uplift your content above the others. And that's something I think is now commonplace, not just podcasting. It's videos, YouTube videos. It's now come down all the way to like social media, right? If your Instagram is nicer looking and well organized, people tend to gravitate towards it, because as an audience we're purveyors of quality, right? So
Right.
if you have a well produced content, people just absorb it better. People like to go back to it. They feel that it's high quality, and they should listen, and they should absorb it more. So yes, I think if you can afford it, or if you really want to sort of use that space as a real big brand builder for yourself, you should invest in the production quality, and I'm sure your marketing department will be more than happy to help you out there.
Right, right. Having said that, Shiladitya, one thing that we noticed in the last year, post March 2020, when sort of the whole world changed, right?
Yeah.
When people moved to the remote and hybrid was is more of a
Yeah.
2021 thing, but when people started working from home, a lot of the slightly older leaders realize that audio video is now a very important part of even being a leader, right?
Yes.
Because they suddenly now had to connect through these channels. They had to again build this, they had to show up regularly, they had to
Correct.
be convincing, persuasive enough. And a lot of people struggled, especially the slightly senior ones, right? Because this was just not
Yeah.
their, their
The
style.
natural style. Yes.
Right, right. So, what would your advice be to these kind of people who are probably still trying to get to terms to this, or
Wow.
people who are just getting to this? Because this is a very important part of building a culture in a company, right? You have to build that whole narrative. If you're talking about some
Correct.
values, these are the ways in which those values are going to get propagated. So, what is your advice to leaders
Correct.
who are
Actually,
trying to
this
come to
is
terms
a
with
very
this?
good question, and I think I've had a conversation similar to this a few times with others who have struggled with the same thing, right? Again, most leaders, again, good leaders in their own right, even before pre-pandemic, were always still seen as good leaders, whatever little you knew about them, right? It's more so internally. I think what people have, any founder or any leader does in their companies, we do all hands, we do sort of company meets, we do offsites, a lot of culture building happens internally for the company. What the pandemic has brought about is that for even those internal events now, you have to use, let's say, this audio and video medium, right? So while that has itself been like a technology change for most people, right, that is at one level, it's also allowed for them to now do this sort of semi internal and external presence, right? So I think people who are used to doing, a lot more speaking to their own teams have sort of transitioned to this easily. It's just been a platform technology changes, what it seems like, right? Instead of me coming and talking, say, in a town hall, I'm now doing this over a multi hundreds of windows of Zoom.
Hmm.
Not, to be honest, it's not the same effect. I don't know how the kids are doing it in school also, by the way, because even that's one of those things. For most other people who have not sort of made that transition yet from audio to video, or not able to do it, I think my advice is, start doing the internal team meetings a lot more. This is uh, not just because of, not just to build this personal brand and to get used to this format, but I think that's also one of the things I've seen companies have struggled with in the last year and a half, right? I've heard a lot of folks saying that, when they were in the office, they used to meet their leaders and their founders. I mean, depends on how big or small a company you were, but you used to have this culture which you used to absorb indirectly, or through various people in the office. When the world has become remote, and especially when you're joining with more people joining newer companies while they were remote, this is something which has become a big sort of gap, at least initially. I've heard that people are not able to associate with the company or their leader, because they only show up on a handful of calls and they talk about a few things, and some guy listening is the 250th Zoom window who will never make eye contact with you. So it's been hard. But the ones who have successfully done this, I've seen that they've done this by over investing a little bit at the start, right? Doing more conversations, showing up instead of doing a all hands once in a quarter. We've had folks do one all hands once a month, right? So leaders showing up more often has two outcomes. One is your company sees more of you, which they otherwise were missing, because otherwise they would have seen you in the office and in and around things. That's one effect. So it builds your culture fundamentally. And second, for you as a leader, it forces you to sort of take on this format a lot more, and it makes you get better at it. I've seen that people used to struggle for feedback on Zoom calls, right? Because if you're talking to a whole room of people, you don't know whether you don't get a sense of how many people are nodding their head, they're smiling or whatnot. So people they used to struggle into whether or not their words are being heard. After some time, you get a sense of, after doing this, when to pause, when to ask a question, when to sort of, how to sort of put a cadence to the kind of topics that you'll be talking. If you have five things to speak about, people have gotten better at making the kind of slides they used to, versus in person versus video. So you get better at it if you do it more often. I think that's the one single piece of advice. I think instead of avoiding, speaking opportunities, you have to actually do the exact opposite. You have to create more of them than you would normally have with with your team and with the company. And the same will happen externally as well. I mean, the moment you get used to it, I've seen people now take it to the other extreme as well. Like they can't stop talking everywhere, which is also, it's not a bad thing at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that brings me to another point, Shiladitya, where we work a lot with companies, especially smaller companies, which are trying to propagate their culture. Right. We help them sort of align on their culture manifesto, and then it's about, okay, we've created the manifesto, but everyone needs to actually keep reinforcing
Execute.
that
Yeah.
on a continuous basis. And there, what we've seen is it has almost, even on an in the internal world, it's almost become like a content machine now, right?
Right.
Because if you don't have those physical cues and in-person meetings, it is these content pieces, channels that are going to actually, make sure that these values are being understood by everyone. Everyone gets what we are talking about, and
Correct.
in fact, both synchronous and asynchronous, right? Because
Correct.
everyone is working at their own,
Yeah.
schedule now, so you can't get everyone to, come on to a live call every day, right? So you have to
Correct.
create a lot of this content, keep it, available for people to check out at 2 a.m. because, that's the slot that works for that person, right? So,
Yeah.
but doesn't
Yeah.
work for everyone else. But you need to make it
Yeah.
available. And this is where what we've been seeing is people who have been using these sort of techniques and tools for the external world, right? Where marketers have been using these things in order to reach customers and all
Correct.
of that. We are, actually getting to start, seeing these things employed with your internal,
Exactly.
employees as well, right?
Exactly.
In fact, culture is like they say culture is a product, and your
Yeah.
employees are
Yeah.
your consumers or customers for that, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Very, I totally agree, and that's one of those things, right? We have had to consciously do. Companies have had to consciously do this. Otherwise, you just lose the essence of the team you were trying so hard to build. Over the years, whether you were founded in the pandemic or whether you were had to transition into it. So yeah, I completely agree. It's one of those things. It's a audio and video as a content mouthpiece is now a mainstay of every type of audience you're dealing with, internal, external. um,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
agree.
In fact, I wanted to, start talking about CleverTap in this context. But before that,
Yeah.
your personal journey. So, how did CleverTap happen in your life?
Oh wow, it's a good story there too. I think it starts with the podcast itself, right? Like I said, I wrapped up my last startup which I was building, and again it folded up after a lot of attempts of trying to build mobile payments, we were way too early for, clearly,
Right.
as the world has shown. Uh, but I started doing the podcast as a step one to again come back to what to do next, right? As a founder, you also want to feel inspired to build something which is somewhat a personal challenge for you as well, right? Because the most passionate ones are the ones who don't operate just on the math of building a startup, like, oh,
Right.
what is a big company problem, what is a big which has a big addressable market, etc. It
Yeah.
also needs to resonate with you personally.
Hmm.
And in order to discover that, I obviously was, clued into the rest of the community, understanding what others are building, what is hot, what is, interesting, what are those interesting challenges to pick up. And that's how the podcast started, in fact. The selfish motive behind the podcast was I'll be able to meet some interesting founders and, understand their growth stories, which will probably inspire mine. And, in the course of that, obviously, I knew the folks at CleverTap. I knew Anand,
Right.
the founder there, personally from quite some time. We spoke about working together in various ways well before that. I think I was a user of CleverTap as a product myself in my own products, and what led to me jumping on board was also that we were at a stage when product had sort of matured. It was just out in the market. It was a free sort of for developers, for startups only platform, but we could see that there was immense potential. We could see that there was potential for this to become an enterprise product, and the world of SaaS as it stood was open for us for the taking. Why I jumped on board again was a similar personal sort of a partially selfish motive, and I've told this to Anand, so I can talk about it. I said that listen, I'm always going to be on the lookout for doing something of my own, because that's just my natural, I would say, rhythm. Because I try to always solve problems and see if I can build a company around it. But why I jumped on board was because I saw that CleverTap as a company was doing that as a product itself, right? We are just like any other SaaS platform. We help companies solve a certain piece of their problem, and one of the biggest problem we help solve is growth and retention with CleverTap. And at the time, the India market and the entire startup ecosystem, and even now more so, was at a juncture where everyone was trying to solve this growth problem, right? Everyone was looking at, how do I get to my, how do I uh, uh, retain my, millions of users that I'm acquiring? How India was at the peak of its, at the start of its sort of growth story, with Geo having just launched, and all these startups coming out from the weeds. So for me personally, it was a chance to look inside at what drives the growth of all of these big companies and big successful startups, right? Whether you look at a Zomato today, or you look at a Paytm, or all of these guys. For me, as a part of CleverTap, I could understand what went into, growing those companies, as a vendor, as a partner in that growth. And I thought that was a, once in a lifetime opportunity for me to actually learn that, because as a founder, I would have the same struggles. If I were to build a, company tomorrow, I would also need to crack growth. I would need to crack retention. I would need to crack all of these sort of technological yet go to market sort of challenges anyone has, right? Depending on what you're building, if you're building a fintech company, if you're building a food tech company, or ed tech company, you all have a formula that you need to sort of employ. So for me, CleverTap was one of the best places to do that from the inside. And now here I am 4 years later, just going from one challenge to the other. We've grown the company, from when I joined, we've grown it almost more than 10x. So it's been quite a journey. And yeah, that's how CleverTap happened back then. And the story so far has exactly been that, right? We've kept on helping more and more companies do, solve their growth and retention challenges, whatever kind of company you may be.
Right, right. Yeah. So coming back to growth and retention, like we were talking about earlier, right? So CleverTap clearly, deals with external markets these days, right? With the customers. But if, content and internal employees becoming, consumers of your culture content is important,
Correct.
then again you're talking about the same two metrics, right? How do
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
retain, and how do you keep them engaged? So, do you see that happening? Is that already happening, or do you see that happening in the near future, where a platform like CleverTap is being used for
Actually,
internal?
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, not CleverTap maybe, because as a product, we are definitely geared for, let's say, B2C
Right.
sort of use cases. But I've started to see this already in, let's say, the kind of HR products that
Hmm, hmm.
companies use, right? We've seen, again, like most companies, we have a Slack channel, and Slack sort of became this de facto alternative of where company communication happens, right? We have a lot of now companies who are building building engagement, gamification, retention, all into, let's say, into your Slack itself. We have HR and payroll company platforms, which used to be the most boring, I would say, of tools you have to use. Again, most employees have to use it only because they have to, not that they really want to do any more HR related work. Again, I may be sounding like I'm bashing the HR community, but I'm not totally. I think that space has evolved, had to evolve so much more in the last year and a half, because of,
Right.
you have to do so much more to now retain employees than you had to before. At least you could give them the perks when they were in the office. Now when they're behind a laptop screen, that too when they want to be, you hardly have access, right?
Right.
So that's where I've seen tools evolve. I think there's a lot of stuff happening, say, like I said, on Slack, where companies are hosting built-in quizzes with their team. They're hosting social hours. They're hosting a whole bunch of personalized gamification. Let's say around, how much, how many hours you're working. There are tools which now help you, not for the the regimented use case of how many hours you're working for, for telling the company, but in fact the opposite, to tell you when to take a break, right? Or tell you when to, when a few other perks of the company are available to you, which you should utilize. So I think that sort of internal personalized engagement has massively increased, and there are tools for it.
Correct.
and there are I'm sure that we'll only see more of that
Right.
as we evolve, as we get used to all of these things.
Correct, correct. Yeah, yeah. Coming back to your, sales role at, CleverTap, right?
Yeah,
How has the last, 18 months, how has this changed your role and the way you work and, the way you
sure.
sell? How has it changed?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And let me first talk about why I even jumped onto the sales bit,
Sure.
right?
Right.
And again, this is I want to share this because it might be very relevant to others who are at a similar decision making
Right.
point, right? A lot of people. I was not a. I would, as you would say, a career salesperson,
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
right? I didn't do an MBA. I didn't join as a sales trainee and then climb the ranks in a sales organization, a sales function. I was I had my only experience was building my own companies, and you do a fair amount of selling as a founder as well. You just do it with a whole different level of passion because it's your own product, right? It's your own baby, and you selling that comes organically to you. Most people, when they are faced with joining a sales role, this is the first thing which they feel is a big blocker, right? I've had people come to me and say that, hey, I've never done sales in my life, I'll probably not be good at it. I tell them that I've said the same thing myself when I started here, because I said, listen, I've only sold what I knew or what I could talk about.
Hmm.
But that actually is one of the prerequisites of just being a good salesperson for anything.
Right.
So whenever you join a sales job, you don't have to have sold in your life before. You should be able to talk passionately about anything for that matter. If you have read a book which you really love, or if you've seen a movie which you really love, and that's sort of your go-to anecdote or your go-to reference point in your conversations with friends, you are selling it, and that's what is being asked of you here. So when you join a company in a sales role, understand that the first requirement is that you know what you're selling. If you do that job right, if you invest your time and effort to understand your product, or whatever function that you're whatever company you're joining, you'll automatically be good at sales. So that's the first thing which I also sort of broke the mold with myself. I said, okay, listen, if I'm going to be good at this, I need to understand CleverTap as if it were my baby, as if I were the founder. And I think and we actually started doing that. We built I built a team around myself which focused on understanding the product as deeply as anyone in the founding team or anyone in the product team or the engineering team, as much as you could,
Hmm.
would understand the product. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to sell.
Hmm.
And in fact, we sort of came up with a concept what we call, just like you have full stack engineers, which is a popular concept, we call it full stack sellers now. So what full stack selling in CleverTap and now hopefully elsewhere is that
Right.
you are not just the mouthpiece of what you're selling, but you're also the solution designer. You're also the person who gives demos. You're also the person who by and large solves technical queries, if not obviously not expecting you to write code, but you have a sense of what goes where, how things work, and you are pretty much the whole and soul of answering any buyer's questions. And when you do that, which we did at CleverTap and continue to do, we saw the success rates are so much higher, because the person on the other side ultimately doesn't want to talk to a salesperson, right? I mean, the notion is when you're talking to a salesperson, you're being sold. So that's the first mental barrier you have to break. You're not trying to sell to the person, you're trying to solve a problem.
Hmm.
And if you come across as a more knowledgeable person trying to solve their problem, you automatically win their favor.
Hmm.
And that is, again, I know this is a little bit of sales gyan, but that's exactly that's what we started indoctrinating at CleverTap when I jumped on board. And we've been doing that for the last 4 years very, very successfully. The last year and a half has obviously been completely different when it comes to the method of selling. I mean, we obviously used to do a lot more meetings. We used to show
Right.
up, used to, do a lot of stuff in person, because
Hmm.
again, the market, whether it's India or abroad, was used to that, right?
Correct.
People were used to salespeople and teams showing up,
Hmm.
giving you a presentation, giving you a demo.
Hmm. Hmm.
What we've realized in the year and a half is that since we're selling a digital product, right? And we're also by and large selling to digital companies. What I
Correct.
mean by digital companies is that their own product in which we integrate, right?
Hmm.
Whether
Hmm.
is usually a digital product. Like
Right.
let's say you have a mobile app or you have a
Hmm.
website. This sort of these two things certainly were in favor. The pandemic was sort of accelerated
Hmm.
adoption of digital products, and that's why selling those became, I wouldn't say easier, but it definitely didn't have the handicaps of selling remote.
Hmm.
People expected now that if I'm buying a digital product, I will converse with whoever I need to digitally. I mean, we'll set up a Zoom call, we'll see a live demo on screen, we'll exchange notes on how this integration happens. They didn't hold the fact that there was no person right there in the room with them against us when it came to buying something like this. I think that's what we saw as a big leveler for us in the in our market, because unlike other folks where you were buying, let's say if you were buying a physical product, you needed to sort of, I'm sure there were troubles with people who had to sell goods and services which were a lot more physical, but for digital goods and services like ours, it actually became easier. We were able to multiply our, I would say, time, because I could jump from a meeting with someone in Bangalore to a meeting in someone in Delhi within an hour,
Hmm.
instead of a day at minimum before,
Right.
right? So I would say we were fortunate to be on the good side of the pandemic when it came to growth, especially because we are a digital company, and we were able to leverage that uh, quite successfully to grow again, more than what we anticipated, to be very honest,
Right.
in
Right.
2020.
Yeah, yeah. So, what I'm also hearing is, Shiladitya, that, the world around you changed, but you were sort of prepared for that because you had already taken that stance of your sales teams being these full stack sellers, right? Which is why it
Yeah.
was so much
Mhm.
easier to adapt to this change. So, what would you say, people who are working in sales and marketing functions, how should they be working towards building their future relevance, because it's not the end of it. The world is going to continue
Right.
to change, right? You're going to
Right.
next probably have VR, AR, or whatever is the next thing that is
Yeah.
going to change
Yeah.
change their
The
role
metaverse is
function.
upon us.
Yeah, yeah. So but
Yeah.
how should individuals be thinking about staying future relevant in the sales and marketing function in a world like this?
Sure. I think it's a good question, because we face it day in and day out, right? As a sales team, if we came up with something which is 4 years ago, and if you're running the same show in 4 years, let me be honest, we are not evolving. We're not
Right.
going to be successful. There's someone smarter out there doing something better. And while we were better prepared, I would say, again, because of the market we were dealing in, we were better prepared, and we were able to sort of capitalize on digital selling. I have also seen a lot more digital selling which we are ourselves not doing yet
Hmm.
happen around me, and things like today also we try to set up a call, we set up a meeting, we get people to show up and do a demo, and that's how you sell. I've now seen a next step of preempting that with, let's say, sending video messages as well.
Hmm.
I've seen people now really start using video and audio, as we were talking about earlier in the show,
Right.
as a content piece, even while selling. Like today, instead of getting an email, I've gotten emails with a video clip of the person talking to me. It's almost like a voicemail, a FaceTime voicemail of sorts, and that is a lot more personable than just some person writing an email to me. Think about it, and this is when I'm talking about people selling to me, right? And I've seen that that little bit of added human touch to that email makes me want to at least acknowledge them.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there's so many cold emails which people just ignore. I've seen that this little bit of personalization of someone putting their video, saying my name and speaking in context instead of it just being sort of a mass blast emailer, makes me want to humanly want to reply to that person and say, hey, let's do this or let's not do this. So I've seen that sales tactics and sales methods have evolved even more in the pandemic, because people have had to, right? People have had to out innovate the market. And so while we ourselves were, like I said, a little maybe ahead of the curve, we still have a long way to go. And sales and marketing as a motion will always keep evolving with, that's the whole point of it. Also, you have to
Correct.
break through. Sales is all about breaking through, getting that one or two sort of leads through, while trying so many methods out. So I think audio video is a big part of that. And now, since you spoke about the metaverse and whatnot, I think the more, you have to. This is another sort of common cliche of sales. You also have to be where your buyers are, right? Uh, in the old world, this used to be, let's say, why people used to go to events. That why you used to do a booth and used to do an event and used to do whatnot. Now those are rare, right? Even I'm hoping the world opens up so that we all can go back to those, because I miss it. But you also have to now be where your otherwise your buyers spend more of their time. I've seen now SaaS companies like ours who sell digital B2B tools. They never cared so much about, let's say, Instagram or about social media, where like probably just Twitter, but they've never cared about the more popular B2C sort of social media outlets. But now I'm seeing them do that, because they've realized that the person buying on the other side spend some time on social media like a human, just every other human as well, right?
Right.
So why should they only be bombarded with Coke and Pepsi ads, or Cred and Unacademy ads? Why not a CleverTap ad or
Right.
anything else that they might be buying in or spending? You spend so much time in a tool, right? You would think the brand should be more visible to you, and that's true. So I've seen B2B companies who used to not prefer this the new age social media also going there. People are, B2B companies are sponsoring, like I said, Instagram stuff. There are folks who are doing it on Snapchat. There are people doing Clubhouse. Clubhouse has become a big, again, a great audio medium. So you have to be where the buyers are, and you have to do whatever it takes to be heard in the new and evolving market. So I'm sure we'll have a metaverse booth soon from
Right.
most of our B2B brands. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you mentioned couple of things in which about which you said that that personable and the human touch is what got you interested in, say, opening that email. Uh, a flip side of that is individuals today also need to prepare how to work with non-human co-workers, right? You now
Mhm.
have AI-based tools which can probably create content as good as a
Yeah.
content writer, but it has to be, like you said, if you just do a mass mail with just that content created, it's not going to work. So there has to be the human touch. A lot of the things that can be automated, that a program can do better, you should be doing that. So how should people be thinking about working with non-human colleagues?
Yeah. Wow. So non-human colleagues, I'm sure most people haven't even embraced that thought. To be honest, I think a little bit of AI that we might be already interacting with on a regular basis is, like I said, just the Slack bots and what other
Right.
things have you. So I think it's a great future thought, right? Because this is the future of most people's work, whether we like it or not.
Correct.
We will be dealing with some sort of artificial non-human interactions, and we have to be prepared for it. Uh, I think the opposite is actually happening first. I think people are trying to train AI to be a lot more human, so that we don't feel that we're talking to an AI. I think that's what people are really trying, right? I think like whether it's these automatic emails, or whether it's the same Slack bots or anything, everyone's trying to make them seem more human, so that it builds bridges the gap between us trying to deal with, let's say, a dumb robot or something like that. But as a person, how to prepare, I think you have to be prepared that non-humans are a lot smarter than humans in when it comes to data, and when it comes to this world we are living in, right? This is a non-human first world. right? The digital world means non-human AI bot has access to way more resources than you and me have when we sit on a laptop. We are still very human in our capabilities of searching and finding data and building connections and whatnot, whereas a non-human bot is way faster. So I think we have to first adapt to doing what we are good at, and maybe staying, keeping those human things with us, and abstracting and outsourcing all the non-human efficient tasks to those colleagues. I think that's what we have to be prepared for, which also is an interesting point. Now while I think aloud, to back to what we started talking about first, right? Why is content such a relevant piece now, or personal brand content or whatever, just creating content? Why is it so much more important now in the world when content in general has exploded?
Right.
It's more important because only true human, real, original thought is what will probably shine through,
Correct.
especially when even the bots, now you have AI copywriters also.
Right.
So right, so when all of that is done, when you have AI video, when you have AI everything, only true original thought and original content is what will hopefully shine through. So it
Right.
matters all the more that you get good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yes. Add your own voice, and I think that's what is going to break it
Yeah, and
better.
do the human parts of it. Do some things which machines still can't,
Correct.
which
Correct.
is day by day very little, but I'm sure we'll still hold the upper hand, hopefully for a few decades.
Right. So, Shiladitya, last few questions. What are the books, people, podcasts that you would recommend to, say, founders, who want to build future relevance for themselves or for their teams?
Wow, lots of them. I mean, I'm not a big book reader as most other folks in my community or founders at large are. That's the honest truth. I've read a few books. I try to read as much as I can. I try to listen and watch a lot more. I think that's where I'm a lot more consumer of, let's say, audio and video content. But I've read a few books which have helped me along all this while. I think the one which most times I've spoken about is Zero to One, because that's the one book which led to Shunya One and led to a few other startup ideas as well. And there are now, much more better versions of that, and a lot more startup books out there. So I won't mention too many, but I think when it comes to podcasts and content, I think that's where there's a lot more relevant treasure trove of stuff which you might find. If you haven't, most people have, if they haven't yet heard the original sort of series of Masters of Scale, I think that was a really good series of podcasts which, spoke about all these big companies we see around us today. I know there are similarly a bunch of other post Shunya One. Now there are a lot more tech podcasts. There's one run by Axel, which is really nice, which again has access to the same kind of, let's say, builders of podcasts that builders of large companies in India, especially. Obviously, the folks in the startup ecosystem in India today, whether it's Your Story or all of these guys, they've all evolved into doing some great audiovisual content, and I think they're very relevant folks to keep track, get a pulse of what's happening in the market. So yeah, these are your everyday sources, and but the biggest one I think is just have your own voice, be where, like I said, your audience is. So if you don't have a Twitter yet, which is rare, you should be on Twitter. If you're jumping into audio, you can try Clubhouse. It's a little mixed bag right now. I think they've gotten a little chaotic. I don't know what the next platform is going to be there. But yes, be on Twitter and follow some interesting people. I think you'll and contribute to the conversation. If you contribute to the conversation, you automatically discover a lot more good, interesting content for yourself.
All right. So, final section, Shiladitya, where I ask for your hot takes on certain things. So,
Sure.
what do you think is the future relevance of traditional startup centers like Bangalore, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Mumbai in India, and even say Silicon Valley? What do you think is the future relevance of these traditional centers?
I think they are still going to be relevant for a while, mainly because the while talent is no longer going to be centralized to those places, I think talent is now distributed, right? Your coders and programmers or copywriters or whatever marketers, your talent is now going to be fully distributed, but those centers are going to be relevant as the, the hubs
Hmm.
of your startup, because while whether you like it or not, the ecosystem still is sort of hinged around these centers. So I have to be in Bangalore, if not for my own team, but for my customers.
Hmm.
If I have to be in Bangalore, if not for my for my employees, but for maybe my the investor community or for my peer network
Hmm.
as founders. So I think leaders and core teams will still have to be in these sort of these epicenters of the startups, but the team is going to definitely be fully remote. Like, think of it as this way, right? It's the week of IPOs in India. I mean, it's a season of year of unicorns or whatnot, whatever whatever you want to call it. These guys are all happening because they exist in these microcosms of like too much money being thrown at you, too much there's just abundance in these epicenters. Like, if you are a startup today in a tier 2 country in India, you have to first get known and be discovered. It's a lot more easier to be discovered if you're in a Bangalore or a Delhi or a Mumbai. Similarly, if you're going public, you will go public on Indian Stock Exchange. It's the NSE in Mumbai or the NYSE in New York, right? So you
Hmm.
can't avoid these sort of traditional structures of
Correct.
these milestones that you want.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think the relevance is going to be there. I think the hype value should go down, but relevance is going to be there.
All right.
So you don't have to be in Silicon Valley to get a job anymore,
Correct.
but you may have to be in Silicon Valley to found a
Right.
iconic company and have it get discovered.
Got it. Okay. What is the future relevance of email newsletters?
Oh, diminishing. Especially as all the things we just spoke about, right? Email newsletters are great for compounded sort of a bunch of information to digest at once, but they are not built for the up and coming short form, short term attention span audience. By and large, the world is becoming 15 seconds of video and audio consumers. There are, I don't, well, the data might, there are a lot of old folks like us. Sorry, Harish, to put you in the same
No,
bucket,
no, I'm
but
happy to be
uh,
there.
there are, there's gonna come a time in the world when there are a lot more younger folks, and that's happening sooner than you think. And those guys don't want to read an email newsletter. They rather just consume the same thing in a 15-second video.
Right. Okay. And final question, I think the most relevant one today. What is the future relevance of podcasts?
Oh, thriving. I would say future elements of podcast is looking good. More because again, we are the newsletter of the audio and video world. If you think about it, right? We are the weekly or monthly or bi-weekly show which someone wants to listen to and tune in while they're doing something else, right? It's passive listening. Podcasting is,
Right.
driving, chores, whatever have you. If you're a pro podcast listener, you probably listen at 1.2x or
Yeah.
1.5x. So
One next becomes
this is
the pain actually.
exactly 1x. Who wants, like, I've had people who've told me that I can't talk to humans anymore because it's only 1x. And so I don't want to go there. But I think we are the newsletter of the new world. We are the one, we are the compendium at the end of the week which someone wants to listen to and absorb when they are at leisure,
Mhm.
or when they're out for a run or for a jog or for, as passive listening. But when I'm active listening, I want to just like tap tap tap, swipe right, and get through my news for the day and or the latest updates for the day. So I think podcasts will only thrive. So yes, let's all keep doing that.
Yeah. On that note, Shiladitya, I think we covered a whole range of topics from podcasting, the art of podcasting, how to get better there, to your personal journey, getting into CleverTap, how things have evolved in the sales and marketing space for CleverTap. So we covered a whole
Yeah,
range of topics, and I think
yeah, yeah.
we're like heading towards the future of work, future of everything, and hopefully podcasts remain relevant as
No,
you
no. If
mentioned.
not, we'll evolve. I'm sure
Yes.
we have it
If
in
not,
us.
we will evolve.
We might as well do it. We started off doing something which most people weren't doing. I'm sure we'll evolve.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Harish. Me and you are. We have a job yet.
Yes, yes. On that note, thanks a lot, Shiladitya. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Harish. It's a really good chat, and thank you to the whole team for doing what you're doing and creating great content.
If you like this, we know you care about your and your team's future relevance. You can find us and click on the subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. There are two ways to enter the insider group of friends of CTQ: a Telegram channel where you'll get daily tidbits that help you think about future relevance, and our weekly email newsletter called The Upleveler. We've got some fabulous testimonials from our subscribers. We share special discount codes for CTQ compounds and exclusive invitations to our events on both these channels. Just go to choosetothink.com, that is think with a Q, and you'll find all the links to subscribe. You owe it to yourself.